Welcome to City News. We are tracking breaking news, and you can almost hear the sigh of relief coming from across Canada this hour. Just minutes ago, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau confirming that U.S. President Donald Trump is backing off on his plan to slap 25% tariffs on Canadian products for at least 30 days. Trudeau posting on social media just minutes ago saying, quote, "I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl." In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. And he continues to say, "I have also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together." On that note, let's bring in our political specialist, Glenn McGregor from Ottawa. And Glenn, this is unfolding in real time. How did the Prime Minister manage to get this last-minute reprieve?
A little bit of telephone diplomacy here today. The Prime Minister and the President speaking twice, once this morning and then just this afternoon, after which Trudeau made that post on X where he announced the 30-day reprieve. And really what Trudeau has done here is given something that Donald Trump can claim as a win on his effort to control the amount of fentanyl coming into the United States, even though Canada doesn't really believe it's that big a problem. Yes, we've certainly had a fentanyl problem in this country, and we can certainly do more to crack down on the import of precursor chemicals that get brought into Canada, mostly from China, and some of it gets smuggled into the United States. But there wasn't really a sense in Canada that this was as big an issue as Trump made it out to be. He was much more concerned about the southern border, which, something in the order of 100 times more fentanyl, according to estimates, coming across into the U.S. that way. But yes, so these new measures that will address some of Trump's concerns on fentanyl trafficking, the appointment of a fentanyl czar. We've never really had czar positions in Canada. It's common in the United States to appoint one person to oversee a particularly contentious file. We're going to do that here. Don't know who that person's going to be, what kind of powers they're going to have. They're not really going to have a ministry, it doesn't sound like, but okay, if that's what Trump wants, the attitude seems to be from the Prime Minister's office, okay, we're going to do that too. We're also going to designate, as you said, Mexican cartels that are producing fentanyl in Canada as terrorist organizations. Again, this is an allegation that Trump has made. We haven't seen a lot of evidence that Mexican cartels are coming up to Canada to make their fentanyl here and then smuggle it to the United States compared to the ones that are already operating in Mexico, sending it south. And then, yes, there will also be this joint strike force to deal with organized crime, drug smuggling, and money laundering. And the federal government's going to put up $200 million to pay for it. We presume that's on top of the $1.3 billion in spending to bolster the border the government has already announced. But at least all these measures now seem to have at least appeased Trump temporarily, and now we start this process where we think we're going to have some negotiations with the American side over the next couple of weeks.
Now, we should mention that Trump also gave Mexico a 30-day pause earlier today on potential tariffs. Again, a 30-day pause. So we have a month. What needs to happen in the coming days and weeks in order to get Trump to back down permanently? I mean, he's in office for the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that announcement of the 30-day reprieve for Mexico came after Trump and Trudeau spoke the first time. There's a lot of concern expressed here that we're not going to get the same deal, that Mexico, even though it's a much greater problem for the United States, both in human smuggling and drug smuggling, is getting a better deal than Canada was getting. But no, we got this reprieve, and now we got to figure out what the Trump administration needs to declare a win here. This is kind of the strategy that Trump uses in these kinds of disputes. Is he likes to use tariffs and other threats as kind of leverage and then declare a win. We saw this when he was dealing last weekend with the government of Colombia about the return of migrants who were deported out of the U.S. There was threats of tariffs back and forth. Eventually, Colombia agreed to continue taking the flights as long as the migrants weren't brought in shackles on military aircraft, as the Trump administration first did in its first week in power. So both sides in that case were able to declare victories. The Colombians, because saying that they stood up to Trump, Trump saying that they backed down, they caved. So they're going to Trump's going to be looking for some concessions, future concessions. One of the things that's been raised in the last day or two by Trump is his concerns about the banking industry in Canada. He feels U.S. banks don't have fair access to sell financial services in Canada. That's not really true. There are 16 U.S. banks currently operating here in Canada, controlling billions and billions of dollars of assets, of Canadian money. They work on different rules than some of the chartered Canadian banks, the big six that we know of, but it's not really a problem. But maybe that's something that in this negotiation process, you can say to Donald Trump, okay, we're going to study loosening our banking regulations for foreign-owned banks. That might be something that appeases him. He may be appeased by all these efforts that we're taking on the border. But the big concern that he's addressed with trade repeatedly over time, Cynthia, is this balance of trade, the idea that we sell more to the Americans than they sell to us. Trump considers that a subsidy. It's not really a subsidy, but maybe there's some moves that Canada could make to kind of appease his concerns about what he sees as an unfair trading relationship. But at the end of the day, 30-day reprieve takes the heat off. This is good news for the Canadian government.
Okay, Glenn, thank you very much. And Premier Doug Ford also taking to social media just minutes ago. Remember, this is truly developing in real time. This statement reads in part, "We have temporarily averted tariffs that would have severely damaged our economy, giving time for more negotiation and time for cooler heads to prevail. Canada and the U.S. need to remain united and focused on the real trade war we're fighting with China. If we want to win, we need to fight together, not each other." And we're live now to Mark McAllister, who's standing by for us. And Mark, the Ontario government has been preparing some moves against the Trump administration tonight, even in the midst of an election campaign. But that statement from Doug Ford also indicated they're standing down, at least for now.
At least for now, that's key. Obviously, we heard over the course of the weekend that the first attempt was going to be remove all U.S. alcohol from LCBO stores and prevent the LCBO from distributing American alcohol to restaurants and bars. That was going to be the first measure, which obviously would have a huge impact in terms of the alcohol sales and the amount that U.S. companies were going to be able to sell in Canada. Also today, this morning, there was a retaliatory measure announced by Ford saying that a contract with Elon Musk's company Starlink was going to be ripped up. That was for rural communities in northern Ontario, $100 million worth for that contract, and that was initially going to be ripped up. It was going to be set aside as of this morning, but we did hear with that announcement this afternoon from Doug Ford's camp that, in fact, that will actually stay in place for now until at least we get back to the point where we're arguing about these tariffs again. It was a long day today in terms of the provincial campaign, and on the trail, Doug Ford did have an avail this morning, and it was all about these tariffs and making a point of saying that he was going to continue the fight and protect Ontario and using the contracts as one measure to fight back. Also, Marit Stiles, the NDP leader, and Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie standing up and saying that they would be willing to do everything it took to protect Ontario in different ways, in different forums, setting up funds to help businesses, etc.